What a transformation. I mean, it hasn't been that long ago that people thought of tequila as that hardcore firewater that you slam back in a single shot. You know, the main ingredient of spring break. Well, of course, all that stuff is still around. But on the other end of the tequila spectrum, there's some pretty amazing things going on. I mean, here at Frontera, over the last decade, we've added dozens of these super premium tequilas to our list. You don't shoot this stuff. But what's the difference between that stuff that you can buy in practically any supermarket and this golden elixir? I mean, what makes one of them firewater and the other one fine dining? And is there a best tequila out there? Well, like with any food or drink, well, practically anything for that matter, you can't really judge it until you know what it is, until you know where it comes from. You know what? There's this town in Mexico that can give us some answers. Yes, there is a town called Tequila. It's just about 30 miles northwest of Guadalajara in the state of Jalisco. And yes, it is the place that you'll find the most famous tequila distilleries. No, they did not name it after the beverage. In fact, it was the other way around. The name tequila comes from the ancient Nahuatl word for the place to harvest plants. Makes sense, doesn't it? So, where does all that tequila come from? It starts right here with this plant, the agave tequilana Weber blue variety, the blue agave. Agave is an ancient plant. It was used in the pre-Columbian times to make cloth and rope. They even fermented the stuff into that milky, nutrient-packed beverage that's called pulque. And then, of course, the Spaniards came along and they added distillation to the mix. And, well, now it's most famous for making tequila. Now, here's the hierarchy, the tequila hierarchy. Any beverage distilled from the agave is called mezcal. So all tequila is mezcal. But not all mezcal is tequila. No, only the stuff that is made from this plant, the blue variety, in Jalisco, where I am right now, and in a few bordering states. Now, this is the way all that came about. Back in the 1750s, there was a group of enterprising families. Maybe you've heard of them, the Cuervos, the Sausas, the Herraduras. Well, they decided that they were going to sell their distillate commercially. They pretty much started the whole modern tequila enterprise. And they decided to do it right here in the town of Tequila because the soil and the climate was so perfect for growing agaves. Well, their mezcal de tequila, their mezcal from tequila, became so famous for its purity, for its quality, that people just started calling the stuff tequila. So get this. There's over 100 million of these agave plants growing in this region at any given time. And most of them are growing in straight rows just like this, because they want to give that plant the opportunity to soak up as much of the altiplano sun and soak in as much of this nutrient-rich soil as it possibly can. Because agave really takes on the flavor of the place where it's grown. Now, it's a cactus, right? Wrong. This plant is actually more closely related to the lily family. And the jimadores, that's what they call the guys that go out there to harvest it, work with very, very sharp, heavy metal spades like this for the harvesting process. And what they do is to cut off all these leaves, and when they've got all of them off of there, they'll dislodge that heart from the ground, from its shallow root. At that point, it'll look like a pineapple, so they call it a piña. They'll hoist it onto a big truck, and they're ready for the next step in the preparation. So these piñas are the heart and soul of tequila. Well, what happens to them next? I mean, do they get squeezed, drained, ground up? What? When these piñas come in from the field, first, they've got to be cooked. Speaking of which, I could use a snack. So why don't we hit tequila? The town, not the bottle.
I think I just may have found the perfect little snack to go along with tequila. These are tacos Plaza de Toros. That's the bull ring tacos. And they're a wonderful little saute of beef tips and chorizo with some crumbled chicharron, the crispy pork rinds on the top of it. Come to think of it, it may be like a bull ring next to a large pig farm, but boy, did those look good. And of course, tequila is the order of the day, and I've got a special order for these beverages here. This is called Tequila Bandera, or tequila along with the flag color. So we've got the green, the white, and the red. And the first thing that you do is to take a little sip of the white, the tequila. Follow that by the fresh squeezed lime juice, the green. And finish it all off with the red of sangrita. That sort of spicy, tomatoey chaser. And the taco Plaza de Toros starts off here with the taco topped with a little bit of guacamole, some onions and some cilantro to sprinkle over the top of it, some smoky tomatillo salsa. I'll put a spoonful of that over the taco. Perfect little tequila snack. Muy bonito. Muchas gracias. More of the same. More good food and tequila. Only this time the two come combined. This is that fabulous Queso Fundido, in Spanish for melted cheese, basically. If you look at it, it sort of looks like a cheese fondue, kind of thickish, but they've woven a little bit of tequila in it. That sounds like that's going to be a phenomenal little snack here. Beautiful blue corn tortilla. Put some of that spiked cheese mixture in it. Now this is made out of a combination of 3 cheeses, and I may be here all day just getting the beautiful strings off. Like that. 3 cheeses. Chihuahua, quesillo, the Oaxacan string cheese, and a type of cheese from Spain that they make a lot here in Mexico now called manchego. Kind of a little nutty in flavor.
I want to show you my version of that queso fundido al tequila. I'm going to start with those 3 icons of the Mexican kitchen. The tomato, green chili, I'm using the little serranos that I chopped here, and white onion. And I'm going to first make a saute. I've got a pan heating here over a medium-high heat, and I'm going to give a little dollop of oil into the skillet and then add the vegetables to it. Now we'll let those cook, stirring them around a little bit from time to time until the onions are soft and the tomatoes have given off all their juices and that juice has reduced to a glaze. I'm grating my cheese now through this box grater, the largest holes on it there. And the vegetables are cooked down. That took about 7 or 8 minutes. I'm going to give it a nice douse of silver tequila.
Well, that certainly filled the kitchen with a lovely aroma. Just cook it until most of that tequila has evaporated. You'll be amazed at the flavor that it will put into this dish. There, that's all that took. And then all of the cheese goes in, and we'll stir until the cheese has melted. I always like to serve Queso Fundido in a warm container. So I've had that in the oven at about 300 degrees. If you can find a container that holds heat, all the better, because then your Queso Fundido will stay warm and ooey gooey for a longer time. Queso Fundido al tequila.
Now those mature hearts of the maguey are just filled with sugar. And the first step in extracting all that sweet juice is to cook those hearts. Since the early days of tequila, that cooking's been done in ovens like this. In fact, these ovens were used at Herradura from 1870 to 1905.
Nowadays, the piñas are roasted, slow roasted in this enormous bank of ovens. 50 to 72 hours is what it takes. Now, certainly the scale is a lot greater, but every step of the process stays the same. I mean, it's still an artisanal product. It's made by hand, fermented by nature, and distilled one batch at a time.
Now back in the day, those beautiful golden roasted piñas would have been crushed in a pit just like this one. Underneath, the weight of this enormous basalt or lava rock stone pulled around by horses or mules. But of course, all that's done by machines today that crush those fibers and extract every little bit of that liquid gold that they call agua miel or honey water.
And they mix that juice with purified water and then just let it ferment for a couple of weeks. It's sort of like making wine. Now here at Herradura, they do that fermentation in huge tanks, and they do it with the natural airborne yeast. There's no added yeast, no heat, no added sugar, but of course they're making the premium stuff, the 100% agave tequila.
Now, you can bottle tequila right out of the still, and they do. They call it blanco or silver. It's silver in English. Or you could age it here in oak barrels. These happen to be the old Kentucky bourbon barrels that they use at Herradura. And of course, the longer that it's aged in the barrel, the better it gets, right? Well, only within reason. You see, it's sort of like wine. Too much time in the barrel can just overwhelm the natural flavors. So how long is long enough? Well, of course, with the Blanco, you've got the brightest, purest agave flavor. But then if you age it 2 to 12 months, what they call a reposado, or rested one, you get the brightness of the agave, but you've smoothed out a lot of the fieriness. Then if you age it over 12 months, what they call an añejo, or an aged tequila, if it's a good one, you'll taste the flavor of the oak, that mellow sweetness woven in, but not overwhelming the flavor of the agave. A beautiful añejo tequila. Supple and soft and perfect for after dinner. Look at the dessert that I've chosen to pair with it. This is Crêpes con cajeta, crepes that are baked with a little blanket of cajeta, that goat milk caramel. This one is infused with añejo tequila, sprinkled with toasted nuts and served with a little vanilla ice cream.
So you can make those crepes with cajeta just with a few staple ingredients, but of course you first got to make the crepes. It's a very simple batter. You start with a cup full of milk, put it into a blender jar, then measure in 2/3 of a cup of flour. Now I'm going to add a couple of eggs. These are those pretty to look at brown eggs. And there you've got your basic crepe batter. But I was thinking, you know, since we're going to be using these with cajeta, why not give them a little extra flavor? I'm going to add to it a little ground up clove and cinnamon. That'll be beautiful with the caramelized goat milk cajeta. And I'm going to give it a dash of that beautifully aromatic Mexican vanilla. Now, I always season crepes with just a pinch of salt. That kind of helps bring out the sweetness. And a touch of sugar. Now, yeah, it's a dessert, but if you add too much sugar to the batter, I'm only going to put about a teaspoon in here. If you add too much to it, the crepes will brown too much. Now, put that onto the blender and turn it on. And I'm going to dribble in about a tablespoon of melted butter. Now it looks nice and smooth, but it needs to rest for a little bit. About a half an hour, I'm going to put it into the refrigerator, and that'll give it a really beautiful consistency. Now we got to turn that batter into crepes. You got to have a pan to bake them in. You could use anything that's about 7 inches across. If you've got a non-stick skillet like this, it works absolutely perfectly. My favorite crepe pan is one that I've had for, well, all my life. I inherited it from my mother. It's probably 50 years old, a well-seasoned cast iron pan. You know, whatever pan you use, you got to heat it up first to about a consistent medium heat. And then I always will take a little bit of oil on a paper towel and rub it all over the surface. Another paper towel dry to wipe it out. So there's just the faintest little hint of oil over the surface there. And then check the consistency of the batter here. It should be, well, let me show you what it looks like here. It should be just very light. It shouldn't be too thick at all. Okay, now I'm going to grab my pan and show you my favorite way to make crepes. A lot of people put in just the right amount of batter to make that crepe one at a time. I like to just flood the bottom of the pan and then tip it all off, making a very smooth, very even crepe, and hopefully what you're going to get is exactly what I've gotten here. Little bubbles all through it so you can see the bottom of the pan. That tells me it's going to be lacy, it's going to be very light and beautiful. Now, once it's set and beginning to brown, which doesn't take but a few seconds there, I run a little knife around the edge of it and then scrape off that little piece. I'll put it over there on the side there. And then loosen the crepe around the edges here, making sure it's completely free. And then I'm going to flip it over. I like to do this with my hands. Look at that. See how pretty that is? Just takes a couple of seconds for it to sear on the other side very lightly. We don't want it to be too crispy. And in a couple of seconds there, you've got a beautiful finished crepe. Now, after you've made the 12 crepes, you got to butter them and then fold them up. That's what I'm in the middle of right now. A little melted butter brushed across the top of the crepe. Flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Fold it in half and then in quarters, and then lay that right into the pan with the rest of them. Now that we've got the crepes ready to go, we got to deal with the cajeta, and you can make it yourself, but it'd take you, well, about
2 or 3 hours, and it's a lot of reducing, and you got to watch the pot. But sometimes when I don't have time for that, then I'll go to the Mexican grocery store and buy the cajeta. Now, this is a standard brand, Coronado brand, and what I always look for here is the one that's labeled 100% leche de cabra. That's the goat's milk, and that has the richest flavor. I also like the version that's called cajeta quemada. It's the darkest caramel. So open that up and put it into a pan. It's a little sticky for me, this store-bought cajeta, so I like to doctor it up, and I'm going to show you how I do that. I like to add a little bit of heavy cream to the pot, and of course that nice little dash of añejo tequila. I'm going to stir it all around, put it over about a medium heat, and let it come to a boil. Okay, once it comes to the boil, you don't want it to boil for very long because you'll lose all that flavor of the tequila. Then take it to the crepes and just drizzle it over, coating them with a nice, even blanket of that luscious cajeta. Now I'm going to sprinkle them with some toasted nuts. Boy, doesn't that look good. And then slide them into the oven to warm the crepes through. Of course, the cajeta is already hot. And that shouldn't take more than about 5 or 6 minutes at 350 degrees. So, tequila is not made from cactus. And the good stuff certainly isn't for shooting. And tequila is not just a tequila, is not just a tequila. No, so much of what's in your glass depends on so many things, on the soil and the sun, the water, the eyes and the hands of the people who know just when to harvest and how to roast and to crush and ferment. The distillation, the aging, they all go together to make the very best tequila. Well, except of course I left out the most important part. That's you. The best tequila is the one that you think is the best tequila, the one that you enjoy the most at your table. So here's the thing. A really great tequila is right up there with world-class wines and brandies. Figuratively and, well, literally, it's the spirit of Mexico.